It's been less than 24 hours since Liz Truss took to the stage and launched PopCon, the popular conservatism. And oh boy, we'll get into some of her crazy antics. But we already covered Jacob Rees-Mogg's blog that he wrote for Conservative Home, espousing the gospel of popular conservatism. And I have no doubt in the coming days we'll be looking over a blog to what, some other conservative probably thinks of this popular conservative movement that has been launched by these two people. Needless to say, this hasn't, shall we say, gone with a bang. It's certainly gone with a pop by the looks of it. The group already appears to have incredibly splintered, and we don't know whether the fact that two of the other Conservative MPs that were meant to be backing this, Simon Clarke, for example, whether he was uninvited or basically just didn't turn up. We're not 100% sure. One of the other interesting things that also should be noted as well, Nigel Farage was there. I was not expecting Farage to be at this. Like, why of a sudden would Nigel Farage be at something like this? And of course, I think this might lend credence to the or at least a lot of people are saying this is lending credence that he might rejoin the Conservative Party after the next election. There's a lot of people saying that maybe there's some dealings going on between sort of these two factions because, well, they believe that there's, shall we say, certain conservatives that aren't true conservatives. That it's what's the term Trice used now? Social no, what did he say now? It's like conservative socialism, or something like that. But essentially, it's conservatives that aren't, shall we say, as far right as they would like them to be. So it does seem to me that there might be some dealings going on in the background that maybe they might be going to reform. We already know that the reformers try to tempt over some Conservative MPs by saying stand for us, we'll give you a guaranteed 5-year wage even if you lose your seat. Once again, shows how much money there is going on in potentially that reform project. And one of the things I will always say, and I always say to people, you can't really be UKIP or make another UKIP or do a UKIP, because the UKIP party had very, very deep pockets, almost of instant unending cash, where they could just get all these candidates out and it didn't matter if they lost, because there was plenty of cash in these very deep pockets to be able to back these types of move. So when you hear a lot of left-wing people go, oh yeah, we're going to sort of become the left-wing UKIP, do you have that serious amount of cash to do the type of thing that UKIP did on a on a regular basis? I don't think so. I don't think so, considering how many left-wing people are put off by, shall we say, approaching the type of people who have that amount of almost infinite cash. We obviously talked about Lawrence Fox, and he's being almost like, again, infinitely funded by another, right-wing billionaire. But we are going to talk about this because I think it is worth talking about, because Truss said some really dumb stuff. And of course, this probably won't be the first time we talk about it this month either, because on the 22nd, so we'll probably cover it on maybe like the 23rd, 24th, she is going to be speaking at CPAC, the Conservative Action Conference. So yeah, prepare for some incredibly more dumb stuff coming from Liz Truss. But before we do get into that, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, well, buy me a coffee. And of course, as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel that way. And thank you very much for watching. And let's get on with the show. So here we go, because this is covered in Guardian, or various people covered it. Truss's PopCon group splinters on launch, but attacks Sunak's policies. So, it was an event intended to mark the reinvigoration of the right-wing conservatism. But even before the first speaker took to the stage on Tuesday morning, the popular conservative group had splintered. Yeah, really united front, guys. Really united. So, of the four MPs billed to speak, just two were present: Liz Truss and Jacob Rees-Mogg. The former cabinet minister, Rana Jalwade, regarded by some as a rising star of the Tory right, pulled out on Monday night with a swipe at her fellow panelists. Again, interesting. Simon Clarke, another Trussite former cabinet minister, was also removed from the lineup by the organisers over 2 weeks ago after calling for Rishi Sunak to be ousted, saying, "This isn't about the leadership," the director Mark Whittlewood said, who had until recently led the Institute of Economic Affairs. He told the room, "I'm personally immovable in my view that Rishi Sunak should lead the Conservatives into the next general election." And exactly, because they know he's going to lose. Their whole pitch to after, or at least to the rest of the Conservative Party, is, oh, look, we have the right ideas. This is the direction we should be going in. A lot of these fights that we're seeing now are fights for the future direction. It's not necessarily for a leadership bid, which was what I think Simon Clarke was really after. Like, this popular conservatism, what Truss and Mark are trying to do now, is after the general election. They are trying to sort of say, this is the direction we need to go. This is what we, the path we should be traveling. It's a fight for the future of the Conservative Party. But this is just, shall we say, a prequel to the type of infighting and civil wars we're going to see post the general election. And oh boy, as I said before, it's going to be fun. And I will repeat this again. The bigger a defeat we give to the Conservatives, the longer this lasts for more than a decade. Because if you inflict a really crushing defeat on the Conservatives at the next general election, which so far we are going, the worse it becomes for them, the worse their infighting becomes. And last time they spent a decade trying to figure out, like, what on earth to do, how to fight back. They were absolutely clueless because they were fighting like they are now, like rats in a sack. And it left the Blair government for quite some time with a very, very free hand to do a lot of stuff. This is what I talk about when I talk about the progressive opportunities that will present itself within the next parliament and even the one after that. Possibly, depending how, again, the defeat is, potentially for the next 3 or 4. And I know that's like 2 decades, but this is how big this split could very well be. And again, the opportunities that present itself for this. So, anyway, it continues. So, although none of the speakers openly questioned Sunak's leadership, much of the rest of the amounted to an evisceration of his policies. The former Conservative Party chair, Lee Anderson, attacked for its approach to net zero. He called for coal mines to be reopened in the north of England, for people to be able to choose whether to pay green levies on their energy bills. He said, "We're burning coal in our power stations, but it's foreign coal," he said. How is that contributing to net zero? It is absolute nonsense. He also said his constituencies, quote, weren't lying awake at night worrying about net zero. The parliamentary chair, Maria Fraser, who is also standing in Chris Grayling's safe seat in Epsom and Elwell, launched an extended attack on Sunak's ban on smoking and COVID lockdowns. She said the ban would create a ludicrous two-tier system where in the years to come, a 50-year-old man will be able to legally buy his cigarettes, but his 49-year-old wife will not. Once that one freedom is surrendered, other freedoms will follow, because the state is no Mary Poppins, she said. Let us never forget the nanny in her most monstrous form, the COVID lockdowns. It's time to put nanny to bed. Yeah. Honestly, we should be really, really glad that those types of people were not in charge during the pandemic, because there would have been no COVID lockdowns, and it could have been infinitely worse. Remember, these people talk about, oh, Sweden never went into lockdowns. It never happened at all. But they don't even care what really happened in Sweden about, the stuff that goes on in Sweden that allowed them for quite some time not to lock down. They eventually did go into lockdown, but because of like many of their social welfare programs, which again the Conservatives would balk at the idea of introducing, they were able to put that officer on. But even they had to go, right, we're going to have to go into lockdown because, as we've said before, um, lockdowns, um, those types of things are going back to almost the Roman times of pandemic protections and like medical health and public health. And yet, oh no, we can't. The economy. Did the economy suffer? Yes. But what's worse? Thousands more people dying because you could have, we were in lockdown, or the economy suffered a bit. Anyway, Rees-Mogg also declared the age of the Davos man is over. Truss also urged her colleagues to stop worrying about getting a job in Sunak's government and take the fight to the left-wing extremists, running UK national institutions instead. Truss claimed that these include environmentalists who are in favour of supporting LGBT people or groups of ethnic minorities. Oh no, the horror. People who support LGBT people and groups of ethnic minorities. The horror of it all. Again, this is culture war stuff, and this is a very much an attempt once again to try and bring the culture wars into UK politics. They have tried so many times to do this, and every time they have done so, it has failed. It has fallen flat on its face. And even in America, where the culture wars took a lot of light, and are still there, there's a lot of evidence to show that, especially when it comes to electoral politics, that fire is not as, shall we say, as hot as it used to be. Otherwise, someone like the Florida governor, DeSantis, would have walked the Republican primaries, no problem, because that was his bread and butter. But he didn't. He lost. He dropped out. He lost to Trump. But there you go. And of course, there are other reasons behind that as well. But if the culture wars were that prevalent, and that hot and popular and a powerful thing when it came to voters, he would have walked those primaries, no problem. But he didn't. Lord Gavin Barwell, sorry, the former chief of staff to Theresa May, called for Truss to, quote, lose the Tory whip for those remarks. Oh, I would love for that to happen. I would love for Rishi Sunak to move the whip from her, but there's no way he's going to do that because he is so weak. He has had the opportunity to remove the whip from so many potential troublemakers, and yet they just choose not to. He's chosen not to at every single point. Priti Patel, Suella Braverman, other two prime candidates could have done that too. Boris Johnson, Jacob Rees-Mogg, not even for this, for other things that they've done in the past. And it's like, he just won't. He's that weak a prime minister. But we've been over how weak he is before. So he said that what Truss has done is more than enough damage to the Conservative Party already. She should apologise for this offensive nonsense or lose the whip. This would force her to sit as an independent MP in the Commons. The Popular Conservative group also aims to try and pile pressure on the Prime Minister to cut taxes, to adopt the hardline policies on immigration, and leave the European Convention on Human Rights. What a shocker. I thought they might do that, and as I've said before, if they ever were to appear in a Tory manifesto, then all bets are off, guys. You need to be voting with the party that's going to defeat that. No third party votes. count, to be honest, or otherwise you do generally risk the Tories getting in and running on that on a manifesto promise, which again we do not want that to happen because that is going to have all kinds of very, very bad consequences for the UK. Let's make that incredibly clear. Well, that should be. Many Tory MPs on the right of the party decided to stay away, saying that I'm not sure what this space is meant to fill, said one MP said privately. The Conservative Growth Group already advocates for libertarian economics. The Common Sense Groups talks about cultural issues. Meanwhile, Kersey Katang, Truss's former secretary and closest political ally, politely decided to announce that he would not be seeking re-election as an MP, probably because he knows he would lose. He knows that honestly, his entire political career is gone. He's tried to distance himself as far as he possibly can from Truss. Doesn't look like that works. Has not worked, and he's probably known that he's probably got to either go wander in the political wilderness for a couple of years before he ever gets, potentially brought back, or he knows he's done. That his political career is just completely over after the mini budget. But there you go. We'll find out eventually, I suppose. And this is where the surprise one was coming in, because I don't think anyone expected for Farage to appear. So one person who was present was the former Brexit Party leader, Nigel Farage, in his capacity as a GB News presenter. A few years ago, Tories found to be associating him risked suspension from the party. But on Tuesday, the attendees were lining up to take pictures with him. Farage said he was not seeking to join the Conservatives, given what they stand for. But he did not rule out standing for Parliament with Richard Truss's Reform Party, saying, I suspect I would agree with a lot of what has been said on the platform this morning, but none of it is going to be in the Conservative manifesto, he said. Whilst there were some big names in Truss's, like Liz Truss, Jacob Rees-Mogg, they did saw Priti Patel coming to the audience earlier, and they are a very small minority within the Parliamentary Conservative Party. So, yeah, already people questioning this group. Why does this group need to exist? I think there was a thing on LBC when they were talking about this. This is now like the 12th such faction to break away, and especially when it's already been pointed out here, you've got all these other different, two different conservative groups that already sort of cover what Truss is talking about, and now she's creating a grouping that brings these two things together. But it just goes to show you how split the Conservative Party are, that even when they've got groups that already talk about that, they feel the need that they've got to create a new group on this. But will Liz Truss lose the whip for this? I don't think she will. I do not think she will. I do not think Rishi Sunak is seriously strong enough to do this. He's proved that time and time and time again that he is just not politically strong enough, does not have the political will to be able to do it, because I think the constant worry for him would be, well, if you pull the whip from someone, well, now that sets a precedent, and technically other MPs will be worrying about that. That might bring some of those MPs, those troublesome MPs, into line a bit, but knowing that if they're going to lose their seat anyway with an upcoming general election, why should we say sit quiet? Why sit pretty? The only threat Sunak has, and he can only ever deploy it once, is calm down or else I'll call a general election. And he can only ever do that once. He can't say it again if they go off and still cause trouble. It's a threat he can only ever use once. We've never heard him deploy that either publicly or privately. But if he does, he gets, it's one chance. And if they call his bluff and he doesn't do it, well, once again, just shows how weak a prime minister he really is. And yet, as I say at the moment, as someone pointed out, rationally, what's we think about, when Rishi Sunak would potentially call a general election. We talked about, May the 2nd's been talked about a lot. Of course, on the Labour side, I don't think it'll happen in November because that will collide far too much with the American presidential elections. So honestly, anywhere between now and like the 25th of January is still the potential dates of when a general election could happen, but we don't know. Um, we just don't know. But it's good to see, Liz Truss and of course Jacob Rees-Mogg. Should we say stockpiling ammunition for the future? Because it's a very prepper attitude they are taking. Of we're not criticizing Sunak, we're not criticizing his leadership, but but we're just going to stockpile all this food and all this stuff, for after the war. Then we'll be ready. you know. Oh, I have been waiting the longest time, and if you've been following my channel for any length of time, I've been waiting for this to kick off for so, so long. And when things like this happen, oh, it just merely whets my appetite for the things to come. It really, really does. But as always, thank you very much for watching, and of course, we'll see you all next time.